Welcome to our new series on Heartworks. Over the weekend, lots of us watched or walked or ran with our friend Dean as he completed a marathon in support of Parkinson's New South Wales. After 41 gruelling kilometres, he came into the home stretch, a cloud of purple shirts running with him and many more people cheering him on towards the finish line. Everyone socially distanced, of course. And someone had thought to bring along a portable speaker, cranking up the immortal lyrics of a great piece of modern culture. Dean later reported that it gave him a real lift as he moved towards the finish line. And you'll recognise the lyrics. Rising up, back on the street, did my time, took my chances, went the distance, now I'm back on my feet, just a man and his will to survive. Now, it was a great classic, and it was, of course, The Eye of the Tiger by the 1980s rock band Survivor. And very suitable lyrics they were, as you can imagine, after 41 kilometres. For those of us who grew up on a diet of Rocky films and the fading hope that St George might once again win a premiership, it was a sort of anthem. When you read the lyrics, though, it was not very PC or civilised. Indeed, it was built around a feeling rather than a specific meaning. It's the eye of the tiger. It's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rival. Now, as far as I know, not many distance runners went out and had eye surgery so that they could see in the dark, or actually had the eye of the tiger. It's what your English teacher at school would have called a metaphor, a figure of speech in which a word or a phrase is applied to an object or an action which is not literally applicable, often because it carries with it an emotion or a cloud of meaning which are richer than saying something like, "His gaze was very intense and concentrated." Our language and indeed our lives are full of metaphors. They're useful, but they can also become sorts of mystifying shortcuts. The Bible's full of them. When we read, for example, that the Lord is my shepherd, we don't really mean that he's a short, uneducated peasant in a smelly coat that looks after sheep. We mean that he cares for us. He knows that we are limited, and his care for us takes account of that in providing us with everything that we need, both one by one and as a group. As you can see, we can communicate all of that with a colourful image, "The Lord is my shepherd," with all the warmth and the feeling that that image brings with it. The day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to wake up early one morning to find Jesus climbing through your bedroom window with a crowbar in one hand, a bag in the other, and a black balaclava obscuring his face. It just means that if you fear it, rather than receive this inevitable prospect with joy at the front door, his return will come when you least expect it, by some other means. It's a helpful metaphor and it has richer meanings, but over-reliance on metaphors can also mean that we're happy to stay with the emotional core rather than really thinking about what the Bible text is trying to say to us. Now, this is a problem when we come in the Bible to words like heart. This word is occasionally used for a bundle of muscle in the chest of animals and humans which pumps blood around the circulatory system. When in Proverbs 23 the proverbialist declares, "My son, give me your heart, let your eyes delight in my ways," it doesn't mean going full Aztec on your firstborn. It means pay attention to what I'm saying to you in such a way that though an emotional and intentional connection, what I will teach you will become embodied in your behaviour. Now you can see why the proverbialist preferred the poetic "My son, give me your heart" to carry this more complex thought. At the same time, however, to understand fully what is being said, we need to stand back from the metaphor and unpack it a bit. Now in life, we seek for all sorts of things, for fulfillment, for pleasure, for wealth, for safety, assurance for our family's future. As a consequence, we make choices. But not being able to see into the future, when we choose, we sort of have to hope that things are going to work out. Help me, Lord, to marry the right person, but how do you know until the time of testing comes? Help me, Lord, to choose the right career, but how do we know until the results of our actions gather around us? And can we say, "I'm glad I did that," or "I wish I didn't"? All of those things lie in the future. They're all unseen by us yet, but not by God. So how does one know? Would you be surprised if I suggested to you that the Bible points to a way where you can actually know? Indeed, much of the narrative of the Bible is really about this understanding of how you distinguish one person from another, such that we come to call one person an evil king and another person a good king, one person a true prophet and another a false prophet. The Bible tells us how this works out. All this, of course, comes together in the figure of David, who is a figure that puzzles us. We often come to think of the faith as a series of instructions on how to be good. Don't do this, do that, go to church, read your Bible, give to the poor, be kind to your mother. Sure, all of those things will be good for you, but none of those things makes you good, and they won't help you choose for the good. They just make you less likely to be bad. And that's why David is so central to the biblical story, and other people like Peter and Paul and the disciples. They are imperfect people whose failures tell us as much about what it means to be held in the grip of God as do their successes. David, the youngest son, the anointed of God, but whose choices leave a trail of destruction that his own son Solomon has to clean up. He commits adultery with Bathsheba. He then arranges the death of Bathsheba's husband, and then their child is born, and when it was born, it died. He brought the ark of the Lord back into Jerusalem, but because of the blood on his hands, he was not permitted to build the temple. And his enthusiasm for the ark was such that he antagonized his wife Michal, the daughter of Saul, and brought conflict into his house. In his pride, he sought to count the strength of Israel, and God sent a deadly plague upon the nation. But this was the man whom Paul says, speaking before an assembly in a synagogue in Pisidian Antioch. After removing Saul, he made David their king. God testified concerning him, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want of him. It was this man, Paul said, who God chose to become the forebear of Jesus. The text says, from this man's descendants, God has brought to Israel the Saviour Jesus, as he promised. We will tell you the good news that God promised our ancestors, that he has fulfilled for us, their children, by raising up Jesus. As it is said in the second Psalm, you are my son, today I have become your father. God raised him from the dead so that he will never be subject to decay. As God has said, I will give you the holy and sure blessings promised to David. That's the gospel. That's the promises which are given to us. They were given to us through David. David read the Bible. He went to church. He gave to the poor. He was kind to his mother, but he also did a lot of other things which in his life would have seen him excluded from modern churches. How was it that to this man that God gave the promises which in the end would be fulfilled in Jesus? Well, Paul says something quite extraordinary here, and there are only two occasions where this phrase is used in the normal English translation of the Bible. And that is the concept of the heart of God. The heart of God. One usage is in 1 Samuel 13, where Samuel is telling Saul that by now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart. The other is here in Acts 13, where Paul quotes this text. He says, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. There are many times that we are encouraged by the text to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul and mind. Or as in 1 Kings 8, it says, and may your hearts be fully committed to the Lord, your God, to live by his decrees and obey his commands. Indeed, the foundational prayer among the Jews was the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord with all your heart and your soul and all your might. That's in Deuteronomy 6. But hardly ever does the Bible actually talk about what is happening in God's heart, or even that he even has one. It takes the story of David to tell us, indeed, that he who is and who is one has a heart after which we can learn to follow. So how do we understand this? What is the heart? What is the heart of God? And how do we learn to follow after God's heart? The key to the interpretation lies in what the phrase from Proverbs says, my son, give me your heart, and then let your eyes delight in my ways. But it is a hard teaching for those people who come out of doctrinal traditions, those people who think the faith is just a bunch of doctrines. It is this, your beliefs are important, but they will not save you. We are not given metaphors because we are capable of knowing everything. Metaphors, in fact, in the Bible are God's way of saying that these things start in the emotional core and then they work their way out into actions before they even become thoughts. As Paul says in Romans 10, Moses writes this about the righteousness that is by the law. The person who does these things will live by them. But the righteousness that is by faith says, do not say in your heart who will ascend in heaven or who will descend into the deep, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? It says the word is near you, it is in your mouth and in your heart. That is the message concerning faith that we proclaim, says Paul. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him up from the dead, you will be saved. So what we believe in concepts is not enough. We all realise this from time to time. When circumstances come and they demonstrate that those who only have a belief have only the semblance of faith without its power. The reason is that most people are actually not very good at thinking. Most people cannot think their way to God because the lamp is too dim, the path is obscured. Too many get lost on their way. How many times are we told by people that I believe, but I'm not into organised religion? Well, me either. And I guess not you either. One cannot always call our community and what it does as organised, but it is deep, it is refreshing, it is connected to the heart. And we too need to believe in our hearts and pursue it on a path and speak it out in our communities like we are doing this morning, so that we do what we do together reinforces what we believe in our minds. That your eyes delight in God's ways, enough such that you will see that the Lord is good and follow those ways. We feel, we think, we do. The technical words there are orthokardia, orthodoxia, orthopraxis. Right feeling, right teaching, right thinking. All of those things are the markers of those who claim to be his. So what is the heart of God such that we can follow it? Those who have been following in Piazza will know that the great 18th century theologian, Jonathan Edwards, talked about this in his writings. The human soul, says Edwards, is the place where the image of God in which we are created is situated. We have two things which animals do not, which he calls the faculties. The first faculty or capacity of the human soul is the power of understanding. We can all soak in the products of our senses. We can see and smell and touch and hear, but we can do more than that, because even animals can do that. What we can do is perceive and then go on to speculate or discern or to understand. Have you ever watched a cat chasing a laser light across a floor, trying to catch it? You can both see it, but the humans, go beyond the appearance. They don't run around chasing the laser light because they know that it's not a real thing. Though, of course, if you've ever walked through a shopping mall, there's plenty of humans who are chasing the flashing lights, but that's a different thing. The second power that we have is the ability, once we have perceived and judged, to be inclined towards choosing what to do with that judgment. The soul, says Edwards, does not merely perceive and view things, but has some way inclined towards or away from the things that it views or considers. Either is inclined to them or is disinclined and averse from them. It is the power to intuitively assess something by liking or disliking, being pleased or displeased, approving or rejecting. And that faculty is called by various names. And this is very important. He says, it is sometimes called the inclination. As it relates to the actions that are determined and governed by it, it is called the will. And when we talk about the mind, when it operates with regard to the exercises of this faculty, it is often referred to in the Bible as the heart. Now, you know what this is. You know people, don't you, who have perfectly good senses. They can see and touch and feel and draw in everything that you do. But for some reason, they have an uncanny ability to make the wrong decisions when they are given the choice. They choose the wrong partner. They chase dreams that are beyond their reach. They believe in things which are peripheral and not core to the faith. Catholics, they say, are trained in guilt. Anglicans are trained into a natural sense of the right to rule. Baptists, an unerring ability to divide over some minor theological issue, which seems so very important to them at the time. I wonder what our inclinations as Pentecostals are. I think that if you thought about it, it wouldn't take you long to come up with a list of our strengths, but also of our failings. That is, our tendencies, our inclinations to chase appearances which are not realities. The mind, filled with the information from the senses, has the ability to construct a reason for the choices that it makes. But it never chooses freely. It is always guided by a preference, an inclination, a bias. When we go back to Edwards, he says, when we talk about the mind, when it operates with regard to the exercises of this faculty, it is often referred to in the Bible as the heart. The heart. The heart in the Bible is the inclination or the leaning of the soul in such a way that human thinking is bent towards a certain way. Where our hearts lean, that's where our thinking goes, and therefore our action. Jesus says that out of the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. Our words say a lot about what our inner inclinations are. And so too with Paul. He says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Our mouths follow our beliefs. Our beliefs follow our hearts. Our hearts are either bent towards God or away from him. And so it is that the mouth speaks what the heart holds to be true, and the mind directs the feet and the hands to act. So now that we know what the heart is, this inclination of the soul to like or dislike, to accept or reject, why is it that if we give the Father our hearts, then our eyes will delight in his ways? Because it is the heart which provides the interpretation of what the senses perceive and the thoughts of the mind entertains. In Psalm 112, the psalmist declares how it is that we can indeed follow Jesus' instruction, for example, to fear not. Surely the righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast, says the psalmist, trusting in the Lord. Their hearts are secure. They will have no fear. In the end, they will look in triumph on their foes. Now, fear is an inclination, a bending of our thoughts and our emotional responses to interpreting things for the worse. Those who have walked in the ways of God, on the other hand, don't fear because their hearts do not incline their thoughts that way. They will have no fear of bad news, the psalmist says. Their hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Their hearts are secure. They will have no fear. So what then is the heart of God, which David was a man after? Well, what is the inclination of God's orientation towards action? And that tells us about him. What will God do? We know that he's not fazed when evil befalls because he's already working out all things towards the good, the Bible tells us. We know that God is love, and in him there is no darkness at all. That when we call on him, his first response, the inclination of his being, is to respond in love. He is wisdom itself. And so he is not confounded about what to do in this situation or that. His choices are always right, always for our good, always directed towards the redemption of creation and to bring all things back into the unity of the kingdom. Now that is the heart of God. And David was a man after the heart of God because despite all of his personal failings, his eye was on what the will of God was in any particular situation. His heart inclined his head and his hands to act as the instrument of God's redemption. And so when Goliath stood up and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine and you are not the servants of, are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Now that is the point. Give me a man, give me a woman who will stand up and not bow down to fear to any who would take the place of God and demand that Israel bow down and become their subjects and serve them. Give me a man, give me a woman, and up steps a boy whose heart was not inclined to fear. And so it was for David, who declares to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." David says to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those who gathered there will know that it is not by the sword or the spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." So David's heart conquered Goliath's head because his whole being was inclined towards believing and acting as if the Lord does save and as if the battle is the Lord's. How are we acting? Here at Liberty Hill, indeed, give us such men and give us such women whose hearts are steadfast and trusting in the Lord, whose hearts are secure. They will have no fear, for in the end they will look in triumph down on their foes. And so it is for those whose hearts are after the heart of God. The good news is that the heart, that inclination to choose this way or that, is trainable. Ezekiel, when he prophesies the coming of the Messiah, describes the work of the Spirit like this. In Ezekiel 36, he says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove you from your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. The work of training this inclination is the work that we are given in being together as the church. It is the work that begins with the hovering of the Spirit over our darkened minds and which progresses through the breaking in of light, and then the lifelong shaping which comes with living under the hand of God. In the next few months, we're going to talk about heart works. It's a very important topic. It is at the heart, so to speak, of many people's fears, of their lack of progress in the faith, of their inability to stand up when the battle gets hot. Well, the battle is upon us, friends. We live it every day with our families, with our friends, with those who need to know Jesus. But if we find ourselves in the middle of the work of God because our hearts are turned towards Him, then we will find even the battle delightful and the yoke of Jesus light. May the Lord bless you. May His peace be with you in your house. We look forward to being together and in the coming weeks to talk more about the works of the heart works, which will make us truly His people. Bless you.